This is video 6 of the Effective Child Protection course for child protection practitioners. Section 3 provides information about how to complete the What Needs to Change grid. This is part of the change element of the Effective Child Protection model. This grid often first appears on social work reports to case conference. It forms the basis of effective child protection. In exercise 3, you are introduced to the change grid. This format has been introduced in social work reports to case conference. It includes 3 questions. These are the change statement or changes, evidence why care is currently not good enough, indication of the behaviour or evidence that would indicate care that was good enough in the future. In this format, all changes are included in the same grid. If, as recommended, there are no more than 3 changes, the grid will include 3 change statements and the corresponding evidence of not good enough and good enough for each one. We'll provide instructions on the completion of each section and provide a case example. The focus on change is one of the central components in effective child protection. It is important to get the change statements correctly identified. In this case example, we'll focus on only one change. The change identified has to be focused on significant harm. This framework around change can also be used in more generic casework outside child protection. But in this context, it is important that the change is focused on addressing the risk of significant harm. It should not be diluted on meeting other unrelated needs. It is central to the likelihood of significant harm. To think of it in another way, if this change is achieved, significant harm should have been reduced to a level that would not require a child protection plan. If there are 3 areas of change, all 3 should be linked to significant harm. So the key principle is that the change is linked to significant harm. In writing the statement, you should also consider: is this change related to the family's unique circumstances? It should be personal to them. Be careful if you write change statements that could be used for any case. When this is discussed with the family, the change statement should mean something to them, that sense of ownership. And it should show the impact of the change on the child. Don't get distracted with parental problems and forget the impact on the child. The change statement should show clearly what needs to change, and it should be easy to understand. When we looked at change statements to avoid, we discussed the use of labels such as domestic violence. This case example is an example of change statements related to domestic violence. However, the statement is developed in accordance with several of the principles. It reads: Mum and Dad need to ensure that they are managing their behaviour and ensuring that the children are not exposed to heated arguments and physical violence, as this has left the children feeling scared in the past. In this case example, this behaviour is directly related to the likelihood of significant harm. It is a description of the family circumstances and the impact on the child. It is clear the behaviour that needs to be addressed. Linking back to the discussion about change statements to avoid, you'll notice that the change statement does not direct the father to a caring dad's course. For each change statement, we need to record the evidence which describes why care is not considered good enough. This will be evidence that has been gathered, It may be observed behaviour, reported behaviour, or facts established through other processes. This will be based on the balance of probability. Not good enough is related to the threshold. The care evidenced as not good enough is indicative of a likelihood of significant harm. So, if you're thinking, where is this pitched? Not good enough is where the child is at risk of significant harm as a result of the area of behaviour that needs to change. In the case example, the evidence is based on reports by the police, what the children say they have seen, and how the children say they feel. Again, for each change statement, we will record what evidence or behaviour would indicate that care was good enough. This is a judgment about when the change has been sufficiently addressed that it was good enough. Good enough means that at a point, the child will no longer be at risk of significant harm. This is not perfection. It is not that all needs are met. It is that the concerns are met and that the likelihood of significant harm has reduced. It is often directly linked to some of the areas of concern. So in the case example, where we have previously heard that the police reports that the children had seen heated and aggressive arguments between parents, in the future, we would expect that the parents ensure no violence or arguments take place between them. Where we have previously heard that the children have told workers that they felt scared at times living at home, in the future we would hope to see the children reporting that they felt safer. The what needs to change grid brings these elements together. A statement about what needs to change, evidence why care is not good enough for that area of change, and a statement of how care would be if it was good enough. In many cases, there will be more than one change statement and evidence of not good enough and good enough against each of these. In child protection processes, the grid is often first introduced in the social worker's report to a child protection case conference. Social workers make assessments of likelihood of significant harm and present this to the case conference. This assessment of what needs to change and why, outlining the outcome we're working towards, contributes to the conference's discussion about the content of intervention plans. These elements drive the child protection plan and the work of the core group. The changes introduced to the case conference will, of course, be discussed with the family and other agencies in the conference. In the discussion, some of the suggested areas of change may be modified or fundamentally changed. A case conference will conclude with a decision about the threshold of significant harm, a confirmation of what needs to change and become the focus of the core group as they develop the child protection plan. It will identify the statements about not good enough and good enough. The areas of change will be the focus of the core group and the foundation of the child protection plan. The evidence for not good enough becomes step 2 in steps to change. The ambition for good enough becomes step 8 in steps to change. Reflect on the information in this section. Having considered how the what needs to change grid is completed, what changes would you want to introduce in your own practice? What have you found most interesting? Are you thinking of ways of improving what you may have written in the earlier exercise? Once you have completed section 3 of the Effective Child Protection course, please progress to the next part, which is Video 7, Exercise 4, where you will again have an opportunity to review your change statement.